Psych 290, Section 39, research methods. I'm going to show this is I'm okay. There's a problem with the syllabus. This is incorrect. These office hours are incorrect. But this is the syllabus for the class. It's at the top of the page on the Blackboard page. This is summer session 2023. I am Bruce Bradway. I do not live in Saline, Arizona. I live in Lost Nation, Iowa. If you look at Chicago and go directly west, that's where I live, about 200 miles west of Chicago. And thank goodness Chicago hasn't come this far. The suburbs are spreading out, but they haven't spread out this far. I live in the middle of a cornfield, and that's kind of exciting for me. Sad that being in the middle of a cornfield is exciting, but we'll go with that. This is my telephone number, 563-503-0524. That's my cell phone number. I wouldn't call me if I were you. I don't always have my cell phone with me. I am not a millennial. I am not a teenager. I am not a junior high student. I do not look at my telephone constantly. As a matter of fact, I look at it I charge it more than I look at it. So it's not always with me. If you were trying to get a hold of me, there are two ways to do that. One is by email. I check my email 3 or 4 times a day. And the other is with office hours. And we have office hours, and I will show you where they are. Whoops. Wait a minute. Where are office hours? Let me go back. Let me get out of that. Okay, here, this is correct. These office hours are correct. I have office hours Mountain Standard Time, 3 to 5 on Monday and Tuesday. That's 3 to 5 in the afternoon. And on Wednesday and Thursday, it's 8 to 10 in the morning. So if you happen to need me sometime between 3 and 5 on Monday or Tuesday, or 8 to 10 on Wednesday and Thursday, then you can get a hold of me I'll be in office hours. And this is my Zoom account. I've had it for a couple of years, and nobody's told me I can't do it anymore. So there you go. So I have office hours Monday through Thursday. If you need to get a hold of me any other time, we can always make an appointment. I'm always available. Students are more important than anything, just about anything as far as I'm concerned. So there you go. Okay, so how are we going to pass this class? Okay. There are two things that we're going to be doing in this class. There's the schedule. Two things we're going to be doing in this class. We're going to be going through the textbook. And I'm going to have exams from the textbook. There are how many? Five exams after every 3 chapters. There's 15 chapters. After every 3 chapters, we will have an exam. So we'll have them at the third chapter mark, the 6th chapter mark, the 9th chapter mark, 12th, and then the 15th chapter mark, and that will be worth 200 points. Also worth 200 points will be your research proposal. Your research proposal should be an idea that you have. I would suggest that you have a passion for this, because it makes it a lot easier to deal with this. So something that you've always wondered about, something that we can pretend to measure. We don't have to actually measure it. If you want to know, how far the Earth is from the moon, well, that's not going to work. Well, let me tell you what my research was. I was living on I was teaching and living on the Fort Belknap Reservation in Montana, and they had had problems with suicide before I got there. And so one of the things that I did when I got there was promote positive psychology, and that positive psychology seemed to stop the suicides that we had seen before. But I wanted to show that this population didn't really need to do this. that suicide could be truncated, could be eliminated with resilience. And I saw the population as very resilient. So the problem that I saw was that suicides can be, or the problem was that there are suicides, and suicides can be alleviated, can be reduced through a strong resilience. And I saw this population as resilient. So the problem was suicide and resilience. Um, I identified my unit of analysis. It was going to be resilience. I was going to show that this population was resilient. So I identified the unit of observation, which was resilience. I didn't develop a survey. I found a survey that measured resilience, and it had been used a number of times to show resilience in a population. My hypothesis was that we could show resilience in a population. We could measure resilience in a population. And the null hypothesis was that we couldn't measure resilience in a population. So my dependent variable was the figure that I received from the survey. It was a numerical figure showing resilience. So that was the independent variable, a factor of resilience. And the independent variable was what creates resilience, what makes resilience in a population. And one of the things I looked at was culture. Another thing that I looked at was age. Another thing I looked at was education. Education and gender was the fourth thing. And the fifth thing was the level of trauma. Okay, so those were my 5 independent variables. My dependent variable was resilience. My independent variables were culture, age, education, gender, and level of trauma. Those are my independent variables. Ethics, anyone that I surveyed had to be voluntary. So that was the ethics of my research. The research design, I had 3 instruments that I used, 3 surveys. One instrument measured resilience, one measured level of trauma, and one measured degree of culture. As weird as that sounds, there is a test that measures culture. Data collection, I actually mailed my surveys to anyone that I knew was an American Indian, which is not that easy, and it's actually not that hard because in Montana, with this population, the names that the individuals had indicated whether they were American Indians or not. Doni was real popular on the reservation. Stiff arm was popular with this population. Talks different. Strike. Those were names that were commonly used for that American Indians had. If I sent a survey to someone who was not an American Indian, usually they just threw it away. And I wasted my money. And they took my extra stamp. But that was okay. This was in 2010. Yeah, it was in 2010. Okay, so the postage was a lot cheaper back then. Who was my population? My population was the American Indian population in Blaine, and there was another county right next door that I used as well. The measurement error, intervening variables. There were no intervening variables that I saw in this research. The sampling technique were the surveys, and there was a demographic. They had to fill out a demographic portion that indicated what gender they identified with, their age, and their education level. And then on and on and on. And the way it turned out was that yes, they measured resilient. As a matter of fact, they had a very strong score, average score for the population, and the factors that led to their resilience. Education had nothing to do with it. Gender had nothing to do with it. Age had nothing to do with it. What did have something to do with it? Oh, I'm sorry. Trauma had nothing to do with it. The hypothesis behind the trauma was the less trauma they had, the more resilience they would have. But that didn't prove to be true. It was insignificant. The one thing was culture. The stronger their culture, the higher their resilience score. So that was my research. And as you can see, I had a research proposal and I identified all of these things and I was able to identify all of these things. Now, strangely enough, a very similar, at the same time I was doing my research, that a very similar research was being done on the Navajo Nation, but he had fewer, he had a smaller sample than I did. Not that that was important. But anyway, okay, so there you go. So what you need to do is come up with a research proposal. Between the two of us, we will talk about all of these things. If you don't quite get it right or it doesn't make a lot of sense, then between the two of us, you and I, we will hammer out a good research proposal for you. If it's viable, then it's possible that you could do this research. But you know, it doesn't have to be something that you can potentially do. Okay? So there we go. Let's go ahead and get started. If anybody has any questions about this, you can email me or come to my office hours and yell at me or whatever. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started with chapter 1. Actually, both chapters are in this PowerPoint. So let's go ahead and get started. This is the second time I've started this. The first time I kind of messed up. So part 1 is the foundations of empirical research. And chapter 1 deals with the scientific approach. Science is a concept that is often misunderstood. It depends on methodology, not on content. So science has to do with how you put the experiment together. It has to be in proper sequence. If it's not in proper sequence, it doesn't matter how true it is. It doesn't matter whether it's extremely important. COVID-19, we have to find out what it is. It has to be we have to find out if it's a virus. We need to know where it comes from. That's not the important thing about science. Science is the methodology. You have to do things in a scientific way. If you don't do things in a scientific way, then maybe we're not getting the right information. If you do it in the scientific using the scientific method, then we will get good results. That's the important thing, is the good results. If you don't do it in a scientific way, then it doesn't really matter what results you get, because it wasn't done properly, and we can't accept those results. Scientists make propositional claims to knowledge, descriptive claims that some state of the world is either true or false. Gravity, is it true or false? Things will fall. If you drop something from a height of 2 feet, if I drop a basketball from 2 feet, will it go up or will it go down? If I drop it, it should go down because of gravity. Propositional knowledge is rooted in a set of beliefs. Beliefs must be true. If I drop it, it will go down instead of up. True beliefs must be justified. So we have to prove that it will do that. Early debates in epistemology centered on experience and intuition. Empiricists believe knowledge claims are justified by sensory experience alone. For example, a posteriori, that what comes after is knowledge. So if we experience something, that is knowledge. Rationalists believe that knowledge claims are justified by rational intuition. For example, a priori, from what is before, and that is knowledge. So both of these are essential. It's important for us to have ideas that we try to prove, and we need experience to prove that our ideas are true. That's the empiricists and the rationalists. So scientists need to be both empiricists and rationalists. The scientific approach is grounded on on a set of basic assumptions. One of them is that nature is orderly, and as you can see, it looks fairly orderly. This flower looks fairly orderly. Another basic assumption of science is that we can know nature. We can know this orderly process. All natural phenomenon have natural causes. Nothing is self-evident. Knowledge is based on experience. Knowledge is superior to ignorance. There is only one good, knowledge, and one evil, ignorance, and that was according to Socrates. The goal of the social sciences is to produce a body of reliable and verifiable knowledge that allows us to explain, predict, and understand. I don't think we've talked about mass shootings yet, but this is one of the things that we're trying to determine. We need to explain what happened. We need to predict that it might happen again. So we need to understand it so that we can predict what's happening, whether it's going to happen again. Scientific explanation refers to the process of relating a phenomenon to be explained to one or more other phenomena. There are three types of scientific explanations. There's deductive reasoning, inductive reasoning, and abductive reasoning. Deductive explanations move from the general to the specific principles. An observed phenomenon is explained by showing it abides by a universal law. When the conclusion follows from the parts or premises of the explanation as dictated by formal logic, it is deductively valid. When the conclusion further follows from the premises that are true, it is deductively sound. Deductive explanations are less common in the social sciences. They are fairly common in the hard sciences, but not in the social sciences, because people are so variable. So it's hard to deduce what's going to happen. An example of how deductive reasoning is applied within social science can be found in a 2014 study of whether biases of racial or gender shape access to graduate level education. A team of researchers used deductive reasoning to hypothesize that due to the prevalence of racism in society, race would play a role in shaping how university professors respond to prospective graduate students who express interest in their research. By tracking professor responses and lack of responses to imposter students, coded for race and gender by name, the researchers were able to prove their hypothesis true. They concluded based on their research that racial and gender biases are barriers that prevent equal access to graduate level education across the United States. Now this is important because I had a student at Ashford who was from Bangladesh, and his last name was Islam. Islam, of course, is the Muslim religion. And that was his last name. And because of his last name, he had a difficult time, despite the fact that his undergraduate degree, he was summa cum laude from Ashford. He had a difficult time getting into graduate school, potentially because of his last name, because his last name identified him as a Muslim. So race and potentially gender, his first name was Muhammad, and and of course that identified him as a male. That may have been a factor as well. But of course, the fact that he was that his name identified him as a Muslim pretty much made it difficult for him to get into graduate school. Now, the interesting thing is, he finally finished his PhD, and he did it in in the normal time. He did it in 4 years, and he's now a college professor, and he is looking for a job right now, and he's having a difficult time landing a job. Now, the question has to be, is it because of his name? Is that the reason that people aren't hiring this individual, despite the fact that he was summa cum laude with his master's degree and with his PhD? So he's a highly touted academic, but he's having a difficult time finding a job. That is really kind of fascinating. He's interviewed all over the country, and he's still having a hard time finding a job, despite the fact that he graduated top in his class. Inductive reasoning begins with specific observations or real examples of events, trends, or social processes that moves to general observations. Using this data, researchers then progress analytically to broader generalizations and theories that help explain the observed cases. This is sometimes called a bottom-up approach because it starts with a specific case on the ground and works its way up to the abstract level of theory. Once a researcher has identified patterns and trends amongst a set of data, he or she can then formulate a hypothesis to test and eventually develop some general conclusions or theories. An example of inductive reasoning in sociology is Emile Durkheim's study of suicide. Durkheim created a sociological theory of suicide based on his scientific study of suicide rates among Catholics and Protestants. Durkheim found that suicide was more common among Protestants than Catholics, and he drew on this training in social theory to create some typologies of suicide and a general theory of how suicide rates fluctuate according to significant changes in social structures and norms. Now, the one thing that you need to understand about Durkheim, he was doing all of this research at the turn of the 20th century. That was over 100 years ago. So what he discovered 100 years ago may not be true in today's society. Abductive or retroductive explanations is used to study hard-to-reach populations, like undocumented immigrants or victims of sex trafficking. Abductive reasoning is a form of logical inference, which starts with an observation or set of observations and then seeks to find the simplest and most likely explanation for the observations. This process yields a plausible conclusion, but does not positively verify it. A juror feels that the defendant looks like the image of the man on the security camera robbing the bank. The defendant stutters and pauses like he is guilty when answering questions posed by the prosecutor. The juror concludes he is guilty, but they are not certain. They have made a decision based on their observations, but they are not certain it is the right decision. And this, of course, is abductive reasoning. Prediction is the reverse of the process of explanation. The antecedent observations merely point out that the initial conditions are present. Prediction is based on the argument that if it is known that event X causes event Y, and X is present, we can predict that event Y will occur. Therefore, if event X occurs, but event Y does not, we can assume that either the statement that X causes Y is untrue, or the antecedent factor X has not been properly identified. Poverty X causes criminal behavior Y, and poverty is present, we can predict that criminal behavior will occur. Therefore, if someone lives in poverty but they do not participate in criminal behavior, we can assume that they either poverty causes criminal behavior is untrue, or the antecedent factor poverty has not been properly identified. Understanding, there are two different approaches to understanding. Verstehen is German for understanding, but in social science it refers to empathic understanding. Verstehen differentiates between the natural and the social sciences and calls for a different methodology for discoveries in each of the social and natural sciences. Predictive understanding by logical empiricists feel that both the natural and social sciences can be studied the same way. They call for more empirical validity before a conclusion is integrated as scientific knowledge. Scientific methodology is a system of explicit rules and procedures upon which research is based and against which claims for knowledge are evaluated. This methodology is tentative, it's open, it's self-critical, and it's self-correcting. Methodology involves explicit rules about communication, thus encouraging criticism and replication. Scientific methodology also demands competence in logical reasoning and analysis. The essential tool of scientific approach, along with factual observations, is logic, the system of valid reasoning that permits drawing reliable inferences from factual observations. Methodology requires intersubstantivity, meaning that knowledge is general and the scientific methodology in particular have to be transmissible. Institutionalized rules for communication, reasoning, and intersubjectivity. Rules for communication, questions aid in forming constructive criticisms. Replication of findings is critical. Rules for reasoning, logical procedures are the foundation of scientific thinking. Reasoning promotes internal consistency to draw reliable inferences based on factual observations. Rules for intersubjectivity. Intersubjectivity is the sharing of observations and factual information to reach consensus. Logic alone is not enough to explain the truth. There must be mutual agreements in the scientific community to fully validate a conclusion. And this intersubjectivity is why we have peer-reviewed journals. We have people making assumptions, they do research, and then other scientists are looking at their research, deciding whether that research is viable or not. They are trying to reach consensus. And that's one of the reasons why we have so many peer-reviewed journals with a lot of different research in it, even in social sciences. And that's one of the strengths of social sciences, is the fact that we have so much research and people are doing constant research in different areas of social science, trying to show that this is a trend, or this is something that has been happening, or is happening now but didn't happen in the past. This is the strength of social science. The actual strength of social science is that it is adaptive. And the science gives us the information that makes it adaptive. There's a reason why the textbooks are constantly being revised in social sciences, and the reason is because things change. Culture evolves, society evolves, it changes over time, and this is what we are seeing. If you don't believe it, just look at miniskirts from the 1970s. Women were wearing miniskirts, and men were wearing baggy shorts. If you look at the Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, when they first came into the NBA, they were wearing really short shorts. They look like short shorts. But then in time, in the 80s and 90s, all of a sudden, basketball players were wearing baggier shorts, and they became baggier and baggier and baggier. And now in the 2000s and the 2010s and 2020s, they're starting to get smaller again. They're not nearly as baggy as they used to be. They used to hang down below your knees. And now they've gotten They've gotten different. The other thing is yoga pants. Now, where nobody used to wear yoga pants, and all of a sudden, now especially now women are wearing yoga pants. Why are they doing that? Are they all practicing yoga that much? And the answer is no. This is a fashion trend. This is how things evolve. Clothes evolve, people evolve. Once upon a time, I can remember very few people ever got tattooed, ever. It just didn't happen. Now all of a sudden, everybody's got tattoos, and it's just really kind of fascinating that society has changed that much in that short a period of time. Well, I'm 73 years old, so I've watched all of this stuff. Hairstyles change, uh, dress changes, modesty changes. It's just really bizarre. According to Thomas S. Kuhn, science is descriptive and demands conformity to a set methodology for collecting information. There is a distinction between normal science and revolutionary science. Normal science is viewed as the routine verification of the dominant theory in any historical period. Normal science is the routine verification of a theory that is dominant in that time period. And a good example would be Freudian psychoanalysis, very strong at the end of the 19th century, into the beginning of the 20th century. Now, very few people actually practice Freudian psychology, the psychoanalysis. It's a lot more popular in Europe than it is in the United States. There in the middle 70s, when I was first started studying psychology, Rogerian therapy, the humanist therapies, were the therapies that people were following. As a matter of fact, I was trained as a Rogerian using Egan's model. And in time, of course, that all changed. Now people are using cognitive behavioral therapy instead of psychoanalysis or humanistic therapy, person-centered therapy. Things change over time. A paradigm is a distinct set of concepts or thought patterns, including theories, research methods, postulates, and standards for what constitutes legitimate contributions to a field. Paradigms have two defining characteristics: unprecedented so as to draw a group of adherents away from competing theories, and open-ended enough to allow for this group to redefine problems with this new theory. Paradigms closely relate to the idea of normal science. In contrast to normal science, Kuhn views revolutionary science as the abrupt development of a rival paradigm that can be accepted only gradually by a scientific community. Paradigm transformation is what is revolutionary in science. Let me give you a quick example. I had a friend who studied geology, and when he studied geology, geology was considered vertical. So you saw mountains, you saw valleys, and everything. There was no real theory as to how things were stuck together. And then after he graduated, there was a revolutionary paradigm. And that revolutionary paradigm was the plate theory, that the surface of the Earth is actually a series of plates. And when there's a volcano, there's a hole in the plate, and magma flows out from that hole, and that is what causes a volcano. Earthquakes are caused when two plates are rubbed together. Now, this was a brand new idea, and it was fairly revolutionary. And since he studied geology prior to this revolutionary paradigm, his geology wasn't any good anymore because the scientific community, accepted the new paradigm. Karl Popper challenges that science is and should be an open society in which no dominant paradigm is ever sacred. Scientists can be taken prisoner by paradigms, but can continually challenge, expand, and improve these paradigms. Science is a permanent state of revolution, and I see Karl Popper as very important because we get stuck in ideas. We get ideas that, and we think that they can never change, that this is always the way it's going to be. But the reality is that, that with new paradigms, with new ideas, we should always be open-minded enough to accept new ideas. Now, one of the problems in academia is that we are continually studying the same thing over and over and over again. And because this was the knowledge when I went to graduate school, I don't want to change. I want it to be the same, because if it changes, now all of a sudden I don't have good information. My information isn't good anymore. And of course, since I have a PhD, people listen to me because of my PhD. And if psychology changes and I don't change with it, now I'm not educated. I'm not as educated as I was before. So society needs to be open. It needs to be an open society. People need to be more open-minded. That's my idea. And this is one of the reasons why I'm teaching a class dealing with social media, dealing with artificial intelligence, dealing with online gaming. Why this is a new movement in the world, and I need to change just like everybody else does. I need to understand what artificial intelligence is. I have my thoughts about artificial intelligence. I see it as replacing knowledge by accepting artificial intelligence as the ultimate type of knowledge, and that's a little different for me. I'm really having trouble with the fact that we can program a computer that is smarter than humans, and I don't believe it, because humans programmed that computer. And the question is, will the computer recognize people's culture? Okay, but we're going to get into that in Psych 321. I teach that class in the fall, so we'll get into that in Psych 321. The research process consists of 7 principal stages: the problem definition stage, the hypothesis construction stage, the research design stage, the measurement, the data collection, the data analysis, and the generalization. The generalization is, what did my research tell us about my subject, about my problem, about my hypothesis? The most characteristic feature of the research process is its cyclic nature. The research process is also self-correcting and represents a rational reconstruction of scientific practices. Now let's pretend that I'm the smartest person in the world and I come up with a research proposal, but there's a problem with my research proposal. Am I smart enough to throw out the old idea and accept the new idea? That is the question. And this is a problem that we have in science, is the fact that people think they're so smart that they have to get everything right every time. And that's not the way the world works. We don't always have the right answers. We just had a president that would not admit that he was wrong. And it caused all kinds of chaos. If we had scientists that couldn't admit that they were wrong, potentially we wouldn't be as advanced as we are today. Okay, so this is chapter 2. That's the end of chapter 1. So let's go ahead and get into chapter 2. A concept is an abstraction representing an object, a property of an object, or a certain phenomenon. Concepts serve a number of important functions in social science research. They are the foundation of communication. They introduce a point of view, a way of looking at empirical phenomena. They are means for classification and generalization. They serve as components of theories and thus of explanations and predictions. Some common concepts in the social sciences include social status, bureaucracy, community, cohort, and relative deprivation. Concepts serve several functions. Wait a second. Okay, all right. Let's go ahead and explain all of these things. Social status is where you are in society. That's social status. That is your social status. My social status is that I am a PhD in psychology, and that gives me a certain amount of respect that people have for me due to my education. Bureaucracy has to do with the federal government, has to do with the state government, has to do with the tribal government, has to do with the people controlling the college. That is bureaucracy. The community has to do with where you live. Now, I don't have much of a community here because I don't really interact with the people of Lost Nation. I don't really interact with a lot of people except my students online. So they would be my community. My fellow faculty members have lots of good friends who are colleagues. Professor Barber, Professor Begay, Marius Begay, Dr. Russ, Dr. Marilyn Begay, Professor Blackwater, Dean Blackwater, he's the dean right now. That would be my community. Now my cohorts are the people that I grew up with. They would be the people of my own age, the people that I interact with. Because I was in the military, my cohorts would be people that were in the military between 1971 and 1983. College, I went to college, started college in 1967, graduated from high school in 67, started college in 1967. So my cohorts are 50, they graduated 50, what, years ago? 52 years ago. Okay, and we had a 50th college reunion, as a matter of fact. Those would be my cohorts. Relative deprivation is any problems that you've had in your life. Concepts serve several functions. They provide a common language, they provide perspective, or a way to look at phenomena. Allow classification and ordering of observations and experiences. Concepts are components of theories. They define a theory's content and attributes. Clarity and precision as the usage of concepts are achieved by definitions. Two types of definitions are important in social science research: conceptual definitions and operational definitions. Conceptual definitions describe concepts by using other concepts. Operational definitions identify a set of procedures required to study a phenomenon that has already been conceptually defined. Conceptual definitions consist of primitive and derived terms. Primitive terms are terms on which there is a consensus about their meaning. Usually their meaning is conveyed by indicating examples. Derived terms are terms that can be defined by the use of primitive terms. Conceptual definitions are neither true nor false and must be assessed within the context of the theory in which they are found. What makes one conceptual definition better than another is the clarity, coherence, and applicability of the definition within the theoretical context. Treating concepts as if they were the phenomena they represent is called the fallacy of reification. Reification means taking an idea and giving it solid properties, such as a wedding ring being the reification of a couple's love. Concepts do not truly exist in the world. They are abstract ideas meant to symbolize a phenomena. An example of a complex and abstract concept would be the definition of alienation. Melvin Seaman observed that literature defined alienation as a sense of the splitting asunder of what was once held together, the breaking of the seamless mold in which values, behavior, and expectations were once cast into interlocking forms. We're talking about alienation. Given this conceptualization, Seaman called for 5 separate conceptual definitions for alienation: powerlessness, meaninglessness, normlessness, isolation, and self-estrangement. Powerlessness, the expectation of individuals that their behavior cannot bring about or influence the outcomes that they desire. Powerlessness. Meaninglessness, the perception by individuals that they do not understand decisions made by others or events taking place around them. This is meaningless. I don't understand it. And possibly this whole lecture is meaningless for you. Normlessness, the expectation that socially unacceptable behavior, such as cheating, is now required to achieve certain goals. And of course, this is one of the problems with AI that we're having with ChatGPT. People are using ChatGPT and they don't have any idea what they're writing. They aren't proofreading what the robot has told them. And because of that, we're not exactly sure where we're going with this. Normlessness. And that is normlessness is the problem with artificial intelligence. Isolation, the feeling of separateness that comes from rejecting socially approved values and goals. And then self-estrangement, the denial of the image of the individual self as defined by the immediate group or society at large. And of course, this is something that we see in collectivist societies. We allow the community to define us. Seaman and colleagues converted the 5 basic definitions of alienation into a series of questionnaire items, operational indicators, that could be answered by survey respondents. Suppose your town was considering a regulation that you believe to be unjust and harmful. What do you think you could do? If the subject responded nothing, then the surveyors categorized the answer as feeling powerless. Seaman and his colleagues were able to transform the concept of alienation from the conceptual level to the observational level. Concepts have both conceptual and operational components. Social scientists face 2 issues when trying to align the 2 levels: congruence and theoretical import. Congruence refers to the agreement between the conceptual and the operational components. Issues of congruence between conceptual and operational definitions constitute an important challenge to social scientists. The U.S. Census Bureau surveys every American every 10 years to determine what race and ethnicity they are. Operationalizing race in this manner is problematic, as social scientists see race as an idea constructed historically via economic, political, and cognitive machinations. Thus, there is an issue between operational definitions, categorizing race, and conceptual definitions, understanding that race is actually subjective. Some concepts cannot be defined operationally. They cannot be observed either directly or indirectly, such as your ego, Oedipus complex, dialectical materialism, subconscious, marginal utility, public interest. None of these concepts can be quantified. According to the orthodox operational approach, a concept that cannot be defined operationally should not be used in scientific research because it can't be verified. Without an operational definition, scientists cannot communicate. Scientists cannot replicate one another's research because they aren't certain they are observing the same phenomenon. So definition is extremely important as far as science is concerned. You have to define your concepts. However, most social scientists hold that they should evaluate scientific concepts not only in terms of observability, but also in terms of their theoretical import. Theoretical import refers to some concepts acquiring meaning only within the context of the theory in which they are found. Anomie is a Greek word meaning lawless. Modern usage of anomie stems from Durkheim's theory of the breakdown between a society and its citizens. Anomie is the feeling of normlessness, from the lack of usual social or ethical standards in an individual or group, especially after the collapse of a government. And of course, this was what was taking place last summer, I think, in Minneapolis. This was Black Lives Matter. Was it last year or the year before that? I guess it was the year before that. Scientific concepts are to be evaluated with reference to their observability as well as their theoretical import, their contribution to the theory in which they are embedded. Concepts gain empirical meaning from operational definitions and theoretical meaning from the theory in which they are employed. One of the most important functions of empirical research is its contribution to the development and refinement of theory. Theory enhances the goals of science. Unfortunately, social scientists have a difficult time defining just what a theory is. And this is the joke. Then a miracle occurs. I think you should be more explicit here in step 2. So he's got all these mathematical formulas. The miracle occurs, and then all this stuff happens. Scientists can only accept a theory when its methodology and practical applications are explicit and credible. Theory is not philosophy. Moral philosophies state value judgments and are not provable but are opinion. Scientific theories are concepts that reflect empirical phenomenon. A good example of a philosophy is a religion. Religions can't be proved. They are belief systems. There is no way of proving them. The classification of theories was developed by Talcott Parsons and Edward A. Shills, and they determined that there are 4 distinct levels of theory: ad hoc classificatory systems, taxonomies, conceptual frameworks, and theoretical systems. Ad hoc classificatory systems consist of an arbitrary set of categories constructed in an effort to organize and summarize empirical observations. It arranges observations in a way that is convenient. It is the lowest level of theorizing. A simple Likert scale is an example of an ad hoc classificatory system. A taxonomy consists of a system of logically related categories constructed to fit empirical observations in such a way that relationships among the categories can be defined. Taxonomies perform 2 important functions in social science research: to provide an orderly schema for classification and description, a shopping list, and summarize and describe descriptive studies. But taxonomies do not provide explanations. Conceptual frameworks consist of descriptive categories being systematically placed within a broad structure of explicit as well as assumed propositions. These frameworks are then used to form propositions that are scientifically tested, and they can be later used to provide explanations and predictions for vast numbers of empirical observations. A conceptual framework is used to illustrate what you expect to find through your research, including how the variables you are considering might relate to each other. Conceptual frameworks belong to a higher level of theorizing than taxonomies. Example of conceptual framework: stress as an independent variables, sleep disorder as an independent variable, troubled adolescence as an independent variable, and depression. All of these lead to the dependent variable, depression. A theoretical system is the highest level of theory. A theoretical system is a combination of taxonomies with conceptual frameworks. A theoretical system relates descriptions, explanations, and predictions in a highly systematic manner. A theoretical system is comprised of propositions that are interrelated in a way that permits some propositions to be derived from others. A theoretical system is comprised of a set of concepts that include both abstract and measurable components. Theory, functions, and types. Example, Durkheim's theory of suicide. In any social group, the suicide rate varies directly with the degree of individualism. The degree of individualism varies with the incidence of Protestantism. Therefore, the suicide rate varies with the incidence of Protestantism, deduced from propositions 1 and 2. The incidence of Protestantism in Spain is very low. Therefore, the suicide rate of Spain is low, and that is deduced from propositions 3 and 4. Axiomatic theories are untestable statements or assumptions about the phenomenon in question, stating a direct causal relationship. Axiomatic theories are so basic that they require no further empirical proof. Axiomatic theory contains a set of concepts and definitions, both conceptual and operational. A set of statements describing the situations in which it can be applied to. A set of relational statements divided into axioms and theorems. A system of logic employed to relate all concepts within statements, deduce theorems from the axioms, combinations of axioms, and other theorems. Advantages of axiomatic theory: it can be used to coordinate research, giving the highest plausibility to a theory. It allows researchers to examine all the consequences of their axioms, which helps determine which parts of the theory have been verified. It's most compatible for causal analysis. Basic concepts of choice theory, 10 axioms. The only person whose behavior we can control is our own. The external control, when individuals try to control others, it is at the expense of an effective working relationship. Number 2, all we can get from other people is information. How we deal with that information is our choice or their choice. Number 3, all long-lasting psychological problems are relationship problems. The problem relationship is always part of our present lives. What happened in the past that was painful has a great deal to do with what we are today, but revisiting this painful past contributes little, if anything, to what we need to do now: improve an important relationship. We can only satisfy our needs by satisfying the pictures in our quality world. All we do is behave. That's number 7. Number 8, all behavior is total behavior and is made up of 4 components: acting, thinking, feeling, and physiology. Number 9, all total behavior is chosen, but we only have direct control over the acting and thinking components. We can only control our feelings and physiology indirectly through how we choose to act and think. And number 10, all total behavior is designated by verbs and named by the part that is the most recognizable. Models are closely related to theories. Models are viewed as a likeness of something. Models usually consist of symbols. Models help simplify and order our view of reality by representing its essential characteristics for easier understanding. Models are used for gaining insights into phenomena that cannot be observed directly. Models in psychology. Myers-Briggs type indicator is a technique that claims to produce a representation of a person's preferences using 4 scales. These scales can be combined in various ways to produce 16 personality types. Types are typically denoted by 4 letters. For example, INTJ, introverted intuition with extroverted thinking, to represent a person's preferences. This model is claimed by CPP, formerly known as Consulting Psychologists Press Incorporated, to produce a good predictor of a person's career and marriage partner preference. It should be pointed out that there is considerable disagreement among psychologists on whether this assessment technique and the implied idealized personality model is of any value to anyone. James Montgomery developed a dynamic model to explain why the population of Puerto Rico became whiter through the middle of the 20th century. He attributed it to these factors: differential fertility, which is the idea that fertility rates might differ dramatically by race; racial classification of children, especially of mixed-race children, racial switching of persons from one race to another. Montgomery's model abstracts certain aspects of these dynamics and focuses on 4 components and 4 processes connecting these components. The ideal is cyclical and follows this iteration. The distribution of couples is considered with pairings such as white-white, white-black, black-mulatto, and so on. These couples have children, which are sorted by the race of the parents. The children go through their own racial classification independent of their parents and are redistributed as such. These children become adults in couple. Some of these men and women might switch their race and reclassify themselves within each couple. For instance, for white mulatto to white black or white white. The social sciences rest on 2 major components, theory and empirical research. There is a controversy about which of these components should be first, theory before research or research before theory. Karl Popper developed a theory before a research process that works like this. First, you construct an explicit model or theory. Second, you select a proposition derived from the theory or model for empirical investigation. Third, you design a research project to test the proposition. 4, if the proposition derived from the theory is rejected by the empirical data, make changes in the theory or research project and return to stage 2. Stage 5, if the proposition is not rejected, select other propositions for testing or attempts to improve the theory. Robert Merton from MIT has argued for a research then theory argument, with empirical research suggesting new problems for theory, calling for new theoretical formulations, leading to the refinement of existing theories, and serving the function of verification. The theory then research strategy consists of these stages. The first stage, investigate a phenomenon and delineate its attributes. Second, measure the attributes in a variety of situations. Third, analyze the resulting data to determine whether there are systematic patterns of variation. And fourth, once systematic patterns are discovered, construct a theory. And that is the end of chapter 1 and 2. And if you go into the discussion, it will lead you, the first thing that you will do is come up with your research proposal. You will come up with a problem that needs to be solved. So there you go. Let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we are going to do is find a problem. And that is your problem, not my problem. I will talk to you about that problem as you develop it.